The first time my name was removed from a legal document, no one told me. I found out by accident, standing in the hallway outside a conference room in downtown Denver, holding a paper cup of burnt coffee, while my younger brother signed something that should have included me. He didn't look at me when he did it. Neither did my parents. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just neglect anymore. This was intentional. Before I go any further, let me pause for a second. If you've ever been sidelined by your own family, quietly erased while being told you were imagining things, take a moment to like this story, subscribe, or leave a comment. You're not alone, even if it feels like it right now. Now let me tell you how I got here. My name is Hannah Cole. I was 34 years old when my family decided, without discussion, that I no longer belonged at the table. On paper, my life looked stable. I was the licensed urban planner for the city of Aurora, Colorado, overseeing zoning compliance and redevelopment permits. My job wasn't glamorous, but it carried weight. I managed multi-million-dollar projects, coordinated with attorneys, engineers, and council members, and signed off on decisions that reshaped entire neighborhoods. I earned $112,000 a year. I paid my own mortgage. I didn't ask for help. At home, none of that seemed to matter. My parents, Richard Cole and Margaret Cole, had built their identity around my younger brother, Evan Cole. Evan was 31, charismatic, and perpetually unfinished. He bounced between ventures, always on the verge of something big, always supported. My parents called him entrepreneurial. I called it protected. Growing up, the pattern was subtle but consistent. Evan forgot birthdays, and it was charming. I forgot a holiday call once in graduate school, and my mother didn't speak to me for weeks. Evan dropped out of business school twice. I stayed up nights earning a master's degree in urban development while working full-time. My parents attended Evan's half-formed pitch nights. They missed my graduation. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was independent. I told myself I didn't need their approval. That lie held until the email arrived. It was a simple calendar invite from my mother, Margaret. Subject line: family meeting. Location: offices of Cole Property Group. Time: Friday, 10 a.m. Cole Property Group was the family business. A small but growing real estate holding company my parents had started 30 years earlier. I wasn't involved day to day, but I had helped more than once, quietly. Rezoning advice, regulatory navigation, risk assessment. I never billed them. I never asked for equity. I assumed the meeting was about Evan. It usually was. When I walked into the conference room, my father was already seated. My mother sat beside him, hands folded. Evan stood near the window, phone in hand. A man I didn't recognize was setting papers on the table. "Hannah," my father said, without standing. "This is Michael Turner, our attorney." Michael Turner shook my hand politely. Neutral. Professional. "We're finalizing some structural updates," my mother said. "It's mostly procedural." I sat down, uneasy. Michael Turner began explaining changes to the operating agreement. New asset allocations, a trust structure, succession planning. He spoke quickly, confidently, like this had already been decided. Halfway through, I leaned forward. Where do I fit into this? The room went quiet. My mother smiled tightly. "Oh, Hannah, this isn't really about you." I looked at the documents in front of me. Evan's name appeared again and again. Managing authority, voting rights, beneficiary status. Mine didn't appear at all. I scanned the pages faster. "I'm not listed." My father cleared his throat. "We assumed you wouldn't be interested. You have your own career." Interest wasn't the point. Inclusion was. "You didn't ask me," I said. Evan finally turned around. "Come on, Han, this is business. You're always so sensitive about this stuff." Sensitive. Michael Turner avoided my eyes. I realized then that this wasn't a conversation. It was a presentation, and I was the audience they hadn't expected to speak. "So you used my work, my advice, my time," I said calmly, and decided I wasn't relevant enough to include. My mother's voice hardened. "We did what made sense for the family." I looked at Evan. "For you." He shrugged. "Someone has to take the lead." That was the first cut. Clean, quiet. I stood up. "You should have told me," I said. My father sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "You're overreacting." I left without raising my voice. I drove home in silence. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I opened my laptop and started reviewing the permits Cole Property Group had pending with the city. Not to retaliate, to understand. What I found wasn't illegal, but it was sloppy. Deadlines pushed, conditions assumed, approvals expected. Things that only worked if no one looked too closely. I closed the laptop and sat back. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. Because being erased wasn't the worst thing they'd done. The worst thing was assuming I wouldn't notice. And that was when I understood something that would change everything. If my family could exclude me so easily, then I owed them nothing in return. Not protection, not silence, not loyalty, just distance. They thought this meeting was the end of it. They had no idea it was the beginning. Distance didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as normalcy. The week after the meeting, no one called to check on me. No follow-up email, no explanation. The silence was its own message. In my family, silence had always meant control. If you didn't make noise, you stayed included. If you did, you were difficult. I stayed quiet, on purpose. At work, things moved fast. The city of Aurora was pushing through a redevelopment initiative along East Colfax, a mixed-use corridor project worth just over $180 million. I was the senior planner assigned to zoning compliance and variance approvals. It meant long meetings, public hearings, and a paper trail that had to be airtight. My name was on every recommendation. That mattered more than my parents understood. Midweek, my brother Evan Cole texted me like nothing had happened. Hey, quick question. Do you know if the city is still strict about parking minimums for mixed-use projects? I stared at the message for a long time. This was the pattern. Exclusion without consequences. Access without respect. I typed back one sentence. You should consult your attorney. He didn't respond. That night, my mother, Margaret Cole, called. Hannah, she said, brisk and bright. I wanted to make sure you weren't upset about Friday. I leaned against my kitchen counter. Upset isn't the word I'd use. Consider it then, she replied lightly. I closed my eyes. You removed me from a legal structure, tied to a business I've supported for years, I said. Without telling me. She sighed. You always personalize things. That phrase again. As if context was emotion. This isn't personal. It's factual. She lowered her voice. Your father and I are trying to secure Evan's future. You're stable. You don't need this. Need wasn't the point. Respect was. I didn't argue. I just said, understood. That seemed to satisfy her. On Friday, I attended a public zoning hearing downtown. Cole Property Group was on the agenda. Evan sat in the front row, confident, relaxed. He waved when he saw me. I nodded, neutral. When the item came up, I listened carefully. The request was for a variance tied to a property they'd acquired on Havana Street. Mixed residential and retail. Reduced setbacks. Parking flexibility. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed what wasn't said. The traffic impact study referenced an outdated ordinance. The environmental review was incomplete. Not fraudulent, just optimistic. The kind of optimism that relies on familiarity. I glanced at Evan. He was smiling. He expected this to pass. When public comment closed, the board turned to me. Ms. Cole, do you have a recommendation? Every eye shifted. This was the moment. I spoke evenly. The application is incomplete. I recommend continuance pending updated documentation. There was a pause. The board chair nodded. So noted. Evan turned around, eyes sharp. After the meeting, he cornered me in the hallway. What was that? He hissed. I met his gaze. The application wasn't ready. You could have handled that privately. I shook my head. I'm not involved privately. He laughed, incredulous. Are you punishing us? No, I said. I'm doing my job. He leaned closer. This affects the business. I lowered my voice. So did removing me from it. His smile disappeared. You're being petty. I stepped past him. I'm being accurate. That night, my father, Richard Cole, called. What happened at the hearing? He demanded. I didn't pretend. The documents were incomplete. You embarrassed us. I exhaled slowly. You excluded me. That was different. How? This is public. I laughed softly. So was the meeting you held without me. He went quiet. "We'll talk about this later," he said. I didn't respond. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated in small, telling ways. My parents stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. Evan stopped texting unless he needed something. At work, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Just a heads up, Hannah. We've had a few inquiries about potential conflicts of interest." I nodded. I anticipated that. I filed a formal disclosure the same day. Full transparency, family relationship, recusal parameters, documentation. It protected me. It didn't protect them. Cole Property Group's permits slowed. Reviews tightened. Questions multiplied. Not because of me, but because the assumption of automatic approval was gone. My family noticed. At a birthday dinner for my aunt, Linda Cole, my mother pulled me aside. "You didn't have to make things difficult." I looked around the table. Evan laughing. My father holding court. No empty chair for me. "I didn't make them difficult," I said. "I made them visible." She frowned. "You're risking your relationship with us." I met her eyes. "You already did that." She had no answer. 2 days later, I received an email from Michael Turner, the family attorney. "Hannah, it might be wise for us to discuss boundaries moving forward." Boundaries, I smiled. Because that word meant they were uncomfortable. And discomfort, I'd learned, was the first sign that power was shifting. That evening, I opened my laptop again. Not to dig, not to sabotage, to prepare. Because if my family wanted to play business without me, they were about to learn what it felt like to operate without my silence. And they still believed I would eventually fall back in line. They were wrong. The email from Michael Turner sat unread for 3 days. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I was busy learning something new about my family. When you stop chasing explanations, patterns start speaking for themselves. On Monday morning, my mother, Margaret Cole, forwarded me an article about work-life balance with a short note. "Thought of you." It was her way of pretending nothing had shifted, a reset attempt. She did that when she sensed control slipping. I didn't reply. At City Hall, the East Colfax project moved into public comment phase. Residents packed the chamber, developers circled, lawyers whispered. I listened, took notes, asked questions that weren't aggressive, just precise. Precision unsettles people who rely on assumptions. After the meeting, my supervisor, Dana Whitfield, asked me into her office. Dana had hired me 4 years earlier. She was direct, observant, and uninterested in family drama. "We need to talk about Cole Property Group," she said. I nodded. "They've requested a meeting. They're claiming inconsistent treatment." I waited. Dana leaned back. I reviewed the file. "Your recommendations are solid, but optics matter." I didn't argue. "I've already disclosed the relationship," I said. "I'll recuse myself from their applications moving forward." Dana studied me. "Are you sure?" "Yes." She nodded. "That protects you. But it also removes a buffer they've been relying on." I knew that. Later that day, Evan showed up unannounced at my office. He didn't sit down. "You didn't have to recuse yourself," he said. "You're overcorrecting." I kept my tone neutral. "It's appropriate. It's hostile." "No," I replied. "It's clean." He folded his arms. "You're freezing us out." I met his eyes. "You froze me out first," he scoffed. "This isn't the same thing." It was. He lowered his voice. "Dad's furious." I didn't react. "He thinks you're trying to hurt him." I paused. "I'm trying to stop protecting him." Evan shook his head. "You always do this. You act principled when you're just angry." I stood. If I were angry, this would look very different. He searched my face, like he was trying to find the sister who used to soften. "You're not backing down, are you?" "No." He laughed once, humorless. "Then you're forcing our hand." I didn't ask what he meant, because 2 days later, I found out. The formal complaint arrived by certified mail. Cole Property Group had filed a grievance with the city, alleging bias, conflict of interest, and retaliatory conduct. It was procedural, strategic, designed to slow things down and put pressure where they assumed I was weakest. I wasn't surprised. I was relieved, because now everything was documented. Dana called me into her office again. "I've assigned this to legal and HR," she said. "You're not in trouble. But this is going to get uncomfortable." I nodded. "It already is." She hesitated. "Do you want to take personal leave?" I shook my head. "No." She nodded once. "Then we proceed." At home, my phone lit up. My father, Richard Cole. "You've gone too far," he said without greeting. I listened. This complaint could damage your career. I stayed quiet. Is that what you want? No, I said calmly. I want fairness. You've always been like this, he snapped. Rigid, unyielding. I smiled faintly. You taught me that. Silence stretched. Then his voice softened. We can fix this. You withdraw your objections. We revise the agreement. You're listed as a non-voting beneficiary. I closed my eyes. You're offering me a title to buy my silence. It's compromise. It's control. You're being unreasonable. I leaned against the counter. You're afraid. That landed. You think this is about power, he said. It is, but not the kind you think. He hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The investigation moved quickly. Internal review, interview requests, emails archived, calendars examined. I answered every question. My parents did not. Evan avoided me entirely. At a neighborhood association meeting, I overheard two developers whispering, "Did you hear about Cole Property Group?" Yeah, family mess. City's looking closely now. I walked past them without comment. On Friday, Michael Turner finally called. Hannah, he said carefully, this has escalated. You filed the complaint, I replied. That was your choice. He sighed. Your parents are worried about reputational fallout. I didn't respond. There's a possibility of mediation, he continued. Quiet resolution. I laughed softly. Quiet for whom? He paused. For everyone. I met my own reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. No, Michael, not this time. I hung up before he could respond. That weekend, my mother showed up at my door. She looked smaller than usual. Tired. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. You're tearing the family apart. I folded my arms. I was never holding it together. Her eyes filled. We did the best we could. I nodded. And I did the best I could with what you gave me. She looked around my apartment. The photos. The quiet order. You don't need us anymore, do you? I met her gaze. I never did. I just thought I wanted you. She swallowed. What happens now? I thought about that. Now I tell the truth when asked. Nothing more, nothing less. She left without another word. On Sunday night, an email from the city's legal department landed in my inbox. Subject line, determination. The complaint was dismissed. No evidence of bias. No retaliation. My recusal was deemed appropriate. Cole Property Group's applications would proceed under enhanced review. Fair. Documented. Slow. I closed the email and sat back. For the first time, my family's leverage was gone, and they knew it. Because Monday morning, Evan texted me one line. We need to talk. I stared at the screen. Not yet, I typed back. Because what they still didn't understand was this. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And the next choice I made would decide what they lost next. When Evan said we need to talk, what he meant was he needed access. I didn't give it to him. For the next 10 days, I moved through my life without adjusting my pace for anyone else. Work, meetings, reviews, evenings alone. I let the noise burn itself out. People who rely on urgency hate silence. It reminds them they're not in control. On Wednesday afternoon, Dana Whitfield called me into her office again. This time, the door stayed open. Legal cleared everything, she said. HR too. But there's another development. I waited. Cole Property Group has requested a meeting with the city manager. They're pushing for an expedited review process. I nodded. That won't happen. No, Dana agreed. But they're claiming financial harm, delay damages. They're framing you as the catalyst. I didn't react. Dana watched me carefully. This may go to city council. That got my attention. City council hearings weren't technical. They were political, public, messy. When? 2 weeks, she said, tentatively. It depends on whether they escalate. I exhaled slowly. Thank you for telling me. Dana leaned forward. I need to ask you something directly, Hannah. Is there anything we don't know? I met her eyes. No. She nodded. Good. Then you're protected. That word again. Protected. I left her office and went back to my desk, but I didn't work. I opened my calendar instead. 2 weeks. I blocked out every evening. Cleared space. That night, my father called again. I didn't answer. Then, my mother. Then, Evan. I turned my phone off. The next morning, my Aunt Linda Cole called. She was my mother's older sister, the quiet one who never took sides out loud, but always knew where things were headed. "Hannah," she said gently, "your parents are panicking." I imagined them at the kitchen table, whispering, blaming, searching for a fix. "Why?" I asked. "Because they don't know how to talk to you anymore." I smiled faintly. "They never did." Linda sighed. "Your father thinks this council thing will humiliate him." I was quiet. "He's not wrong." She paused. "Is that what you want?" I thought about it carefully. "Number 1, I want accuracy." She was quiet too. Then she said, "I think you're stronger than they ever understood." I thanked her and ended the call. 2 days later, Evan showed up again. This time, he waited. I saw him through the glass walls of the planning department lobby, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He looked like someone who had never been told no and didn't know what to do with it. I didn't invite him in. I walked out. "What do you want?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Dad's talking to Turner. They think if you make a statement, things calm down." I crossed my arms. "What kind of statement?" "That you overstepped. That you regret how things unfolded. Something vague." I laughed quietly. "You want me to lie?" He frowned. "You want this to get worse?" "Worse for whom?" He stepped closer. "You don't understand what you're risking." I met his gaze. "You don't understand what I already lost." He hesitated. "You could still be included." There it was again. The carrot. "Included how?" "We could revise things. Limited equity. Advisory role. No voting rights, but still family." I shook my head. "You're offering me a place on the sidelines and calling it generosity." His face hardened. "You always had to complicate things." "No, Evan. You simplified me." He stared at me, searching for something familiar, something pliable. "You think you're better than us now." I answered honestly. "I think I'm done being smaller for you." He exhaled sharply. "Then this goes to council." I nodded. "So be it." That weekend, my parents hosted a barbecue. I wasn't invited. I heard about it anyway. Neighbors, family friends, people asking questions. "What's going on with the city? Why is Hannah's name in the emails? Is everything okay with the business?" My parents smiled and deflected. They always had. But rumors don't need confirmation to grow. On Monday, the agenda was published. City Council Special Session. Item 4B. Review of development permit procedures related to Cole Property Group. My name wasn't on it, but the implication was clear. Dana called me into her office again. "You won't be presenting," she said. "Legal will, but you'll be there." I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" I thought about it. Yes, and I was. The night before the session, my mother came to my apartment again. This time, she knocked longer. I let her in. She didn't sit. "Your father hasn't slept," she said. "He thinks this will destroy everything he built." I leaned against the counter. "He built it assuming I'd always clean up quietly." She looked at me, eyes wet. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded. "Intent doesn't erase outcome." She swallowed. "If you testify, it'll be permanent." I met her gaze. "It already is." She shook her head. "Families don't do this to each other." I tilted my head. "Families don't erase one child to protect another." She had no answer. When she left, I stood by the window and watched her walk to her car. Smaller, slower. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. The council chamber was packed the next evening. Media, developers, curious residents. Cole Property Group sat together in the front row. My parents on either side of Evan. They didn't look at me when I took my seat behind legal counsel. The city manager opened the session. Calm, neutral. "This is a procedural review," he said, "not a judgment of character." My father leaned forward, jaw clenched. Legal presented first. Clear timeline, documentation, disclosure, recusal. No wrongdoing. Then public comment opened. My father stood. "Richard Cole," he said. "Local business owner. I want to say how disappointed I am that internal family matters have become public obstacles." I didn't react. "This city knows my integrity," he continued. "We've always worked collaboratively." Murmurs followed. Then Evan stood. Evan Cole, managing partner. "This process feels punitive. We've been unfairly targeted." Dana glanced at me. I stayed still. Then the council chair asked a question that shifted the room. "Miss Cole," he said. "Hannah Cole. Would you like to respond?" Every head turned. I stood. I didn't raise my voice. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about process." I disclosed a conflict and recused myself. The rest followed policy. I looked at my father, then at Evan. If accuracy feels like an attack, that's worth examining. Silence filled the room. I sat down. The chair nodded. "Thank you." The session ended without fireworks. No ruling, just acknowledgement. But as people filtered out, I saw it in my father's face. He finally understood. Not that he'd lost control, but that he'd never had it over me in the first place. Outside, Evan brushed past me without a word. My mother lingered. "You've changed," she said quietly. I nodded. I had to. She looked like she wanted to say more. Then she didn't. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Dana. "You handled that perfectly," I typed back. I know, because the truth was no longer something I feared. It was something I carried calmly. And this wasn't the end. Not even close. Because once a family's private hierarchy becomes public record, nothing ever goes back to the way it was. And the next thing they would lose wasn't procedural. It was personal. The personal fallout didn't explode. It thinned. That was the part no one warns you about. When a family loses its grip, it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just recalculates who it speaks to, who it avoids, who it quietly blames when no one is watching. The morning after the council session, my father, Richard Cole, didn't call. Neither did my mother, Margaret Cole. Evan Cole went silent entirely. No texts, no appearances, no attempts to smooth things over. Instead, I heard from everyone else. A colleague stopped me in the hallway at City Hall and said quietly, "That must have been hard." Another asked if I needed time off. Dana Whitfield checked in without making it a thing. People weren't gossiping. They were adjusting their understanding of who I was. That mattered. What didn't matter was the story my family began telling in private. My Aunt Linda Cole called me 3 days later. "They're saying you blindsided them," she said. "That you made it public to humiliate them." I didn't argue. Linda hesitated. "Is that true?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I spoke when asked. That's all." She sighed. "Your mother is telling people she doesn't recognize you anymore." I smiled faintly. She never recognized me to begin with. The first real consequence landed the following week. Cole Property Group's lender requested updated disclosures. Routine, on paper. But lenders don't ask questions unless something has shifted. Their attorney wanted clarification on governance, conflicts, and internal controls. Evan called me that night. "You knew this would happen," he said. Accusatory. Tired. I leaned back on my couch. I knew scrutiny would follow. "You could have warned us." "You warned me by excluding me," I replied. He scoffed. "You act like this is justice." Number 1. I act like this is cause and effect. There was a pause. "Dad's thinking about selling one of the properties." I nodded. "Probably wise." "You don't sound sorry." "I'm not celebrating," I said. "But I'm not intervening either." That's when his voice cracked. "You don't care if this hurts us." I closed my eyes briefly. "I care. I just won't absorb it for you." He hung up. That night, I slept deeply. A week later, my mother showed up again. This time, she brought a folder. I didn't invite her in right away. She stood in the doorway, holding it like an offering. "We need to fix this," she said. I stepped aside. She laid the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were revised documents, updated trust language. My name appeared in a new section. Limited. Conditional. "We added you," she said, "as a beneficiary. Not operational, but included." I looked at the pages. "You added me after you were questioned." She flinched. "We realized we made a mistake." "No," I said calmly. "You realized exclusion has consequences." She pressed her lips together. "Your father is embarrassed." I met her eyes. I was erased. She swallowed. "We didn't think you'd react like this." That sentence landed heavier than the rest. "Like what?" "Like you'd stand your ground." I closed the folder. "I'm not signing anything." Her shoulders sagged. "Why not?" "Because this isn't about paperwork. It's about how easily you decided I didn't belong." She sat down heavily. "You've always been so independent. We assumed you didn't need us." I nodded. You assumed wrong. Tears welled up, but I didn't move to comfort her. What do you want from us? She asked. I answered honestly. Nothing. She looked stunned. Nothing? I stood. I don't want revisions. I don't want titles. I don't want retroactive inclusion. I want you to sit with the reality that you made choices without me, and now I will make choices without you. She stared at me, searching for negotiation. This isn't how families work. This is how boundaries work. She left quietly. The next development came from an unexpected direction. My supervisor forwarded me an email from the city manager's office. A new role was opening. Deputy Director for Compliance and Ethics Oversight. Citywide. Cross-departmental. They wanted to know if I'd be interested. The position would mean a promotion, a raise, and more visibility. I read the description carefully. This role would require public trust, absolute neutrality, and an even clearer separation from family business interests. I replied, yes. That evening, I called Linda. I'm stepping back further, I told her, professionally. She was quiet. Your parents will see that as abandonment, I smiled. They taught me how to leave. 2 days later, Evan sent a text. Dad wants to meet. Just the two of you. I stared at the message. I'll think about it, I replied. He responded almost immediately. He's scared. I put the phone down. Fear hadn't stopped them before. At City Hall, the gears kept turning. Reviews continued. Permits moved forward under scrutiny. Cole Property Group wasn't blocked. They were simply treated like everyone else. That alone was a shock. At a community meeting, a resident approached me. You're Hannah Cole, right? Yes. My brother works in development. He says things are changing. For the better. I nodded. That's the goal. As I walked home that night, I realized something quietly unsettling. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned off, leaving something colder and more stable underneath. Clarity. The next morning, I received an email from Michael Turner. Your parents would like to propose mediation. I didn't reply, because mediation implies both sides want reconciliation. And I wasn't there. Not yet. Instead, I focused on the role interview. Prepared, reviewed case studies, thought about what kind of authority I wanted to hold, not power over people. Protection of process. On Friday, my father finally emailed me himself. Hannah, I don't know how to talk to you anymore. I don't recognize the rules. I read it twice. Then I replied, these aren't new rules. They're just not tilted in your favor anymore. He didn't respond. That weekend, I sat alone in my living room, the city quiet outside, and understood something that shifted the weight of everything. They were waiting for me to come back into the old role, the fixer, the quiet one, the reasonable one. And as long as they waited, nothing would change. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't preparing to confront them next. I was preparing to move on. And when I did, the loss wouldn't be loud. It would be permanent. Moving on didn't look dramatic. It looked administrative. The interview for the deputy director role took place on a Tuesday morning in a windowless conference room on the 5th floor of City Hall. 3 panelists, 1 legal counsel, 1 HR representative. No small talk. Just questions about oversight, risk tolerance, and how I handled pressure when personal interests collided with public duty. I answered honestly. I don't believe neutrality means silence, I said. It means consistency. The same standard, regardless of who's standing in front of you. They nodded, took notes, moved on. When it ended, Dana Whitfield walked me back to my desk. You did well, she said. Whatever happens, you've already changed the way this department operates. That stayed with me. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Evan, again. Dad's really not doing well, he wrote. He keeps saying he raised you better than this. I read it twice. Then I replied, he raised me to be competent. He just didn't expect me to use it without permission. Evan didn't respond. 2 days later, the offer came through. Deputy Director, salary bump, broader authority. A clause requiring full separation from any family-owned entities. I signed it the same day. That evening, I called my grandmother, Ruth Cole. She lived in Fort Collins now, closer to the mountains, quieter than the life she'd raised 3 children through. I told her about the promotion. She laughed softly. You always did like clean lines, I smiled. They make things easier to see. She paused. Your parents haven't told you yet, but they're selling the Havana Street property. I nodded. That was inevitable. Your father is angry, she continued. Not at you, at himself. He won't say it out loud, but he knows he misjudged you. That didn't bring relief, just confirmation. A week later, my father asked to meet again. This time, not through Evan, not through my mother. Directly. He suggested a cafe near Sloan's Lake. Public. Neutral. No legal counsel. I agreed. He arrived early. Older. Smaller. His hands trembled slightly when he lifted his cup. Hannah, he said. Dad. We sat in silence for a moment. I didn't recognize you in that council chamber, he finally said. I met his eyes. You never looked closely. He flinched. That hurt. I nodded. It was supposed to, he sighed. I thought protecting Evan meant protecting the family. And what did protecting me look like? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Eventually, he said, I assumed you'd be fine. I leaned back. That assumption cost us years. He nodded slowly. I'm not here to ask you to fix anything, he said. I just need to understand where I stand. I thought about that. You stand where everyone else does now, I said. Outside my decisions. He swallowed. That feels like punishment. It's not. It's equality. He nodded again. Your mother wants you back at Sunday dinners. I smiled faintly. I'll come when I'm invited, without conditions. He didn't argue. As we stood to leave, he said quietly, I should have listened sooner. I looked at him. You should have listened the first time I spoke. He watched me walk away. At work, the new role settled quickly. I inherited files, teams, responsibilities. Some resistance, some relief. People adjust fast when clarity replaces favoritism. One afternoon, an ethics complaint crossed my desk. Not about my family, about a different developer. Similar assumptions, similar shortcuts. I handled it cleanly. That night, I realized something important. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is reactive, loud, short-lived. This was alignment. My family's losses weren't because I took something from them. They were because I stopped giving something they'd relied on without acknowledgement. Silence. Access. Protection. As summer approached, my phone rang less. My calendar filled with work that mattered. My evenings became quiet in a way that felt earned. One Sunday, my mother sent a message. We miss you. I stared at it, then replied, I'm here when you're ready to see me, not manage me. She didn't answer, and that was fine, because the truth had already settled in. I wasn't rebuilding bridges. I was building a life that didn't collapse when bridges burned. And the next test wouldn't come from my family. It would come from myself, from deciding whether distance was enough or whether something else needed to be said. And I wasn't sure yet which would cost more. Distance is easy when it's new. It feels like control, like clarity, like finally breathing without permission. The harder part comes later, when distance stops being a reaction and starts becoming a habit. That's when you have to decide whether it's a wall or a boundary. By June, I had settled fully into the deputy director role. My days were structured, predictable. I reviewed compliance frameworks, mediated disputes between departments, and sat in meetings where people chose their words carefully around me. Not because they feared me, but because they knew I paid attention. That reputation followed me home. One afternoon, as I was leaving City Hall, I ran into Daniel Ruiz, a senior project manager from a regional development firm. I'd worked with him years earlier, back when I was still invisible enough to be underestimated. Hannah Cole, he said, smiling. I hear you're the one slowing everyone down now. I smiled back. I prefer the term, keeping everyone honest. He laughed. Fair enough. Listen, I wanted to say this earlier, but I never had the chance. What you did with the Cole property situation, it changed things. People are more careful now, in a good way. I nodded. That was the point. As I drove home, his words stayed with me. Changed things. Not fixed, not destroyed. Changed. At home, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother, Margaret. We're having your father's birthday dinner this weekend. Just immediate family. No business talk. You're welcome if you want to come. No pressure. I read it twice. This was new. An invitation without expectation. Without guilt. Without the implied obligation to smooth things over. I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat on my balcony and watched the sun drop behind the buildings. I thought about the girl I'd been in that family. The one who absorbed tension so others didn't have to. The one who translated silence into effort. If I went, it would be because I chose to, not because I was needed to stabilize the room. On Friday, I replied, "I'll come for dessert." The dinner took place at my parents' house, the same house I'd grown up in. Same walls, same furniture, different atmosphere. When I arrived, Evan was already there. He looked up when he saw me, surprised, then uncertain. "Hey," he said. "Hi." No hug, no tension, just acknowledgement. My father looked relieved. My mother looked nervous. We talked about neutral things: weather, my grandmother's health, a neighbor's new dog. No one mentioned City Hall. No one mentioned the business. That was intentional. When dessert was served, my father cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he said. I stiffened slightly, then relaxed. Whatever this was, I didn't need to manage it. "I owe Hannah an apology," he continued, "for not listening, for assuming, for deciding things without her." The room went quiet. He looked at me. "I can't undo what I did, but I can say this publicly, in this room. I was wrong." I met his gaze. "Thank you." That was all I said. He nodded, as if that answer both disappointed and relieved him. Afterward, my mother walked me to the door. "You don't owe us forgiveness," she said softly. "I know." She hesitated. "But I hope you'll still let us be part of your life." I considered her words carefully. "I will," I said, "on terms that don't cost me myself." She nodded. When I got home, I didn't feel lighter or heavier. I felt balanced. The following week, something unexpected happened. An ethics review from a neighboring municipality reached out. They wanted to consult with me on a new oversight model. Paid, independent, outside my city role. I reviewed the request carefully, cleared it with legal, structured it cleanly, and then I accepted. Not because I needed more work, but because I wanted to choose where my influence went. That choice mattered. Evan called a few days later. "I heard about the consulting thing," he said. "That's impressive." "Thank you." He hesitated. "I'm stepping away from the business for a while." I waited. Dad asked me to. Said I need to figure out what I'm actually good at without him smoothing things over. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "That's probably healthy." He exhaled. "I don't know who I am without being protected." I answered honestly. Neither did I. At first. He was quiet. "I'm trying not to resent you," he said. I smiled faintly. "That's your work to do." He didn't argue. At City Hall, I noticed a shift. Developers asked more questions before submitting applications. Attorneys sent cleaner filings. The shortcuts were still attempted, but less often. Systems change slowly, but they do change. One evening, Dana stopped by my office. "You've done something rare," she said. "You separated personal accountability from professional integrity, without turning either into a spectacle." I shrugged. "I got tired of performing restraint." She smiled. "It shows." That night, as I walked home, I realized the question that had been circling me for weeks had finally sharpened. Distance had protected me, but clarity had changed others. The question now wasn't whether I could maintain my boundaries. It was whether I wanted to say one last thing out loud. Not to accuse, not to reconcile, to close the loop, because silence had been my shield. But truth, spoken once, might be the door. And I needed to decide whether opening it was worth the risk. The answer didn't come immediately, but it was coming. I didn't plan the conversation. That was the difference this time. In the past, every interaction with my family had come with preparation. Scripts, emotional forecasts, exit strategies. This time, I let the opportunity arrive on its own. It came through my grandmother, Ruth Cole. She called me on a quiet Tuesday evening. "Your parents are coming up this weekend," she said. "Evan, too. I'm making dinner. Nothing formal, just food." I waited. "I told them you might come. I didn't promise." I smiled to myself. "You never do." She laughed softly. "I thought it might be good. Not to fix anything. Just to say what hasn't been said." That was exactly what I'd been thinking. I agreed. The house in Fort Collins was warm and familiar. When I walked in, my parents looked up like they weren't sure whether to stand. Evan stayed near the window, hands in his pockets. We ate. We talked about small things. The kind of conversation that pretends history isn't sitting between the plates. After dessert, my grandmother stood. "I'm going to let you all talk," she said. "I've lived long enough to know when to leave a room." She disappeared down the hall. The silence that followed was thick, but not hostile. I broke it. "I'm not here to argue," I said calmly. "I'm not here to renegotiate the past." My father nodded slowly. "Then why are you here?" I looked at him. "Because I don't want the last thing between us to be confusion." My mother clasped her hands tightly. "Say what you need to say, Hannah." I took a breath. "When you excluded me from the business, it wasn't the first time I'd been minimized. It was just the first time it was written down." Evan shifted. "Growing up, I learned that being reliable meant being invisible. That if I didn't cause problems, I belonged. And the moment I stopped absorbing discomfort, I was labeled difficult." My father looked down. "I want you to understand something," I continued. "I didn't step back to punish you. I stepped back because staying meant agreeing with how little I was valued." My mother's eyes filled, but I didn't stop. "You don't owe me remorse. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for acknowledgement." Evan spoke quietly. "I didn't think about it that way." I met his gaze. "I know. That's part of the problem." He nodded once. My father finally spoke. "I thought I was protecting the family," I answered evenly. "You were protecting familiarity." Silence again. My mother swallowed. "What happens now?" I didn't hesitate. "Now I live my life without shrinking it to make room for anyone else's comfort. You're welcome in it, if you can respect that." My father looked up. "And if we can't?" I held his gaze. "Then this is where we stop. No threats, no anger, just clarity." When I left that night, nothing dramatic happened. No one chased me, no one begged, but something had shifted. At work, the consulting role expanded. 2 more municipalities reached out. I structured the contracts carefully. Limited scope, defined authority, clear exit clauses. I was building something that didn't depend on loyalty, only on competence. That mattered. Evan texted me a few days later. "I keep replaying what you said," I replied. "That's good. Reflection usually comes late." He didn't respond. My parents stayed quiet. No guilt texts, no updates, no pressure. That silence felt different, not punitive, respectful. One afternoon, Dana forwarded me an internal memo, a department-wide update on compliance protocols. My language, my framework, adopted across divisions. She added a note. "This is lasting change." I sat back and let that sink in. Lasting. That evening, I walked through my neighborhood, summer air heavy and still. I thought about revenge, the way people expect it to look. They expect destruction, public collapse, someone brought to their knees. What they don't expect is absence. They don't expect you to stop engaging entirely. My family had lost access to my labor, my emotional regulation, my ability to translate their intentions into palatable outcomes. They were adjusting to that loss. And so was I. Late that night, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "I'm trying to learn how to listen without planning my response." I stared at the screen. Then I typed, "That's all I ever wanted." She didn't reply, and I didn't need her to. Because for the first time, I wasn't measuring progress by how much they changed. I was measuring it by how little I needed them to. There were only a few chapters left now, not of conflict, but of consequence. Because when systems shift, the people who benefited most always feel it last. And my family was about to understand exactly what that meant. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They arrived as interruptions. Small delays, missed assumptions, doors that used to open automatically and now required explanation. For my family, that shift was disorienting. They'd mistaken access for entitlement for so long that losing one felt like losing both. I heard about it through my grandmother first. "Your father is tired," Ruth Cole told me over the phone. Not physically, structurally. I understood what she meant. Cole Property Group hadn't collapsed. That was never the point. They were still operating, still profitable. But every decision now required scrutiny, external consultants, compliance reviews, lender oversight. The friction they'd once avoided by leaning on proximity was now unavoidable. My father, Richard Cole, hated friction. A week later, my mother, Margaret Cole, called. "Just to talk," she said quickly. "No agenda." I listened. "We're not used to things moving this slowly," she admitted. Your father keeps saying it feels like walking uphill in sand. I leaned against the kitchen counter. That's what process feels like when you're not used to it, she sighed. I didn't realize how much we depended on you until you weren't there. I didn't respond right away. Dependence without acknowledgement isn't trust, I said finally. It's convenience. She didn't argue. At work, the contrast was sharp. The consulting role expanded into a formal advisory position. I sat across from mayors, city attorneys, and compliance officers who didn't know my last name carried baggage. They judged me on clarity, not lineage. That was freeing. One afternoon, after a long session, I received an email from Evan. He'd written 3 drafts before settling on a short message. I resigned from the business. I stared at the screen. Then another message came through. Dad didn't fight me. He just looked relieved. I closed my eyes briefly. That was new, I replied. What's next? I don't know, Evan wrote. For the first time, that feels honest. I nodded to myself. Honesty is a beginning. The next development came quietly. My father stopped calling, not out of anger, out of recalibration. My grandmother explained it gently. He's trying to figure out who he is without managing outcomes. I understood that better than he knew. In early August, the city released a public report, a summary of improved oversight standards. My work referenced but not spotlighted. Exactly how I wanted it. Dana stopped by my office with a copy. You're leaving a mark without leaving fingerprints, she said. I smiled. That's the goal. That evening, I attended a small gathering hosted by the consulting group. No speeches, no recognition, just people who took process seriously. A woman in her 50s leaned toward me. I've been in municipal governance for 30 years, she said. You don't see many people walk away from leverage voluntarily. I sipped my drink. Leverage isn't useful if it costs too much to hold. She nodded. Your family must be proud. I paused. They're learning. That was the truth. A few days later, my father emailed me. No subject line. Hannah, we sold the last property you advised us on. Not because it failed, because I didn't trust myself not to repeat old patterns. I read the message twice. He continued. I thought leadership meant protecting people from consequences. I'm learning it means letting them face them. I closed the email without replying. Not because it didn't matter, because it didn't require response. That night, I slept deeply. When you stop caring other people's expectations, your body notices first. By September, the story had shifted entirely. People no longer asked about the family situation. They asked about frameworks, about accountability models, about what happens when informal power is removed from formal systems. I answered those questions with ease, because I'd lived them. My mother sent a message one evening. I'm reading a book on boundaries. I think I misunderstood them my whole life. I smiled faintly. That's common, she replied. I wish I'd learned sooner. I didn't correct her. Learning late is still learning. As summer faded, I realized something quietly significant. I no longer felt responsible for what my family lost. Not the business ease, not the control, not the image. They lost those things because they'd built them on exclusion. I'd simply stepped away. One evening, as I walked home, the air crisp with early fall, I felt a familiar question surface. Was this enough? Not the justice, the distance. Had I said everything I needed to say? The answer surprised me. Yes, because the most important truth had already been spoken, not out loud, but through consistency, through refusal, through the calm decision to live differently. There was only one chapter left, not about them realizing something, but about me choosing what I wanted to build next. And this time, it wouldn't be shaped by reaction. It would be shaped by intention. By October, my life had slowed in a way that felt deliberate, not empty, not quiet out of avoidance, just paced by choice instead of reaction. Mornings started without checking my phone. Evenings ended without rehearsing conversations that might never happen. That alone felt like a kind of wealth. The deputy director role had settled into something steady. The novelty wore off, leaving behind real work. Policy drafts, audit trails, training sessions that mattered more than presentations ever did. I spent long hours reviewing language that most people skimmed past, because that was where intent hid. I liked that responsibility. One afternoon, the city manager asked me to sit in on a closed session with council leadership. Not about my family, about a proposed public-private partnership that raised familiar concerns. informal influence, undefined accountability, pressure to move fast. I listened, asked questions, flagged risks. When the meeting ended, one council member lingered. "You have a way of slowing things down, without making enemies," she said. I thought about that later. I hadn't slowed things down. I'd removed shortcuts. That difference mattered. Outside of work, my personal life rearranged itself without effort. Some friendships deepened, others faded when I stopped being the one who adjusted. No drama, no confrontation, just a quieter alignment. One evening, Daniel Ruiz invited me to dinner with a small group of colleagues. Not networking, just conversation. We talked about housing policy, ethics fatigue, the strange loneliness of being the person who says no. At one point, someone asked, "How do you not take it personally when people push back?" I answered honestly. I stopped mistaking resistance for rejection. That felt true. When I got home that night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Handwritten, familiar handwriting, my mother. I opened it slowly. She wrote about small things. The garden, a neighbor moving away, a recipe she'd finally perfected. Then, halfway through the page, the tone shifted. I didn't realize how much of my identity came from managing everyone else's comfort. When you stepped away, it felt like a failure. Now I think it was exposure. I read that sentence twice. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to see me. She just named something honestly. That was new. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not as evidence, as context. A week later, Evan emailed me. Subject line, update. He'd enrolled in a project management certification program. Community-based. No family funding. No shortcuts. He wrote about how strange it felt to be accountable to people who didn't know his last name. I didn't respond right away. When I did, I wrote one line. "That discomfort is teaching you something." He replied a few hours later. "Yeah, I think it is." My father remained mostly silent. When he did reach out, it was brief, neutral, almost cautious. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. In mid-October, I was invited to speak at a regional governance workshop. Small room, no cameras, no press. Just people who cared about systems more than optics. I told a version of the truth. I spoke about what happens when informal power replaces formal process, when family loyalty blurs professional boundaries, when silence is rewarded and questions are treated as betrayal. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Afterward, a man in his 40s approached me. "I've been protecting my brother's company for years," he said quietly. "I tell myself it's loyalty, but I'm exhausted." I met his eyes. Loyalty that requires self-erasure isn't loyalty. It's compliance. He nodded slowly, like something heavy had finally been set down. That moment stayed with me, not because it felt like revenge, because it felt like release. Late one Friday afternoon, Dana stopped by my office. "You've been offered a permanent seat on the Oversight Advisory Board," she said. "Independent, state level." I blinked. I didn't apply. She smiled. They noticed. The position would mean more influence, less operational work, a broader lens. I asked for the weekend to think about it. That night, I walked alone along Cherry Creek Trail. The water moved steadily beside me, indifferent to everything that had once felt urgent. I thought about the last year, about how everything had started with a small assumption, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't object, that I would absorb. And how everything that followed hadn't been driven by anger, just refusal. I realized something important then. I didn't want more power. I wanted permanence. Structures that didn't depend on who showed up. Standards that didn't bend for familiarity. Work that didn't require me to be liked. On Sunday, I accepted the advisory role. The email was short, professional, clear. When I closed my laptop, I felt no rush of triumph, no sense of winning. Just alignment. That evening, my grandmother called. "I heard you moving into something bigger," she said. I smiled. "Wider, not louder." She laughed softly. "That suits you." She paused. "Your parents are adjusting. Slowly. They're quieter now." I nodded. Quiet isn't bad. No. It's often where people finally hear themselves. We hung up, and I sat with that thought. For years, my family had filled every silence with assumption, with control, with noise. Now, Silence was doing the work for them. And for me, because the truth was, I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not apologies, not recognition, not restoration. I'd already taken back what mattered. My time, my authority over my own life, my right to choose without explanation. There was only one chapter left now, not about conflict, not about closure, but about living forward, fully aware that the past no longer had a vote. And this time, I wasn't walking away. I was walking into something I'd built myself. The strange thing about stability is how quietly it arrives. There was no moment where I woke up and thought, I'm healed now. No line in the sand where everything before felt distant and unreal. Instead, life began to feel less sharp, less reactive, like I'd finally stopped flinching. By November, the advisory board work had started. Monthly meetings, policy reviews that stretched across counties, sometimes states. The conversations were slower, more deliberate. No one was trying to impress anyone else. Everyone understood the cost of getting it wrong. I fit there easily. That surprised me at first. Then it didn't. One afternoon, after a long session, I stayed behind with the board chair, Eleanor Price, a former judge with a reputation for seeing through people without humiliating them. You don't posture, she said, gathering her papers. Most people do. I smiled slightly. I'm tired of performing. She nodded. That's usually when people start being useful. At home, my days were simple. Work, walks, meals cooked without distraction. I started sleeping through the night again. Deep, uninterrupted sleep. The kind you don't notice until you've gone without it for years. My family drifted at the edges. My mother sent occasional updates. Neutral. Observational. She no longer tried to fix things in her messages. That felt intentional. My father sent one email in mid-November. I'm learning how to step back. It's harder than I expected. I didn't reply right away. When I did, I wrote, learning something hard at this stage still counts. He responded with a single word. Thank you. Evan called once. I'm failing my first project review, he said, almost laughing. Apparently, effort doesn't replace experience. I smiled. It doesn't, but it builds it. He hesitated. I used to think you were rigid. Now, I think you were just early. I let that sit. That might be the closest thing to accountability I ever get from him. Thanksgiving came and went. I didn't attend the family dinner. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I had other plans. Friends. Chosen company. A long table filled with people who knew me without needing me to manage them. My phone buzzed once during dessert. A text from my grandmother. Proud of you. Always. I felt that land fully. In late November, the advisory board reviewed a case that mirrored my own story in uncomfortable ways. A municipal official accused of favoritism tied to family interests. Gray areas, emotional arguments, quiet pressure to minimize. I spoke once. We can acknowledge intent without excusing outcome, I said. The public deserves systems that don't depend on personal restraint. The room went quiet. Then the vote passed unanimously. That was the moment I understood the final shift. I wasn't reacting to my past anymore. I was using it, not to settle scores, to shape standards. At home that night, I found myself thinking about my younger self. The one who stayed late, who fixed problems before they were noticed, who believed being needed was the same as being valued. I felt something close to tenderness. She did what she had to do to survive, but she wasn't meant to stay there. In early December, my mother sent another letter, shorter this time. I'm trying to let people experience the consequences of their own choices, including me. I closed my eyes when I read that. That sentence would have meant everything to me once. Now, it meant something different. Progress, not reconciliation. Not absolution. Progress. A few days later, Dana invited me to coffee. I wanted to tell you something before it becomes public, she said. I'm stepping down next year. I blinked. What? She smiled. You're ready for more than you think. Don't rush it, but don't pretend you don't see it either. I laughed quietly. I'm not chasing anything. Good, she said. Then whatever comes next will be earned. That stayed with me. December settled in cold and clear. The city slowed, meetings spaced out, deadlines softened. One evening, as I walked home under early holiday lights, I realized something that felt final. I no longer rehearsed conversations with my family in my head. Not arguments, not explanations, not imaginary confrontations. The loop had ended. There was nothing left to prove, nothing left to extract, nothing left to defend. The space they once occupied was now filled with work I respected, relationships that were reciprocal, and silence that didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. There was only one thing left. Not a confrontation, not a reckoning, but a choice about how openly I wanted to name what I'd learned. Not for them, for the people still standing where I once stood, waiting to be chosen. And that decision would shape the final chapter. I didn't end the story by cutting anyone off. That's what people expect. A clean break, a dramatic line drawn in permanent ink. But real endings are quieter. They don't slam doors. They close them gently and then stop checking if they might reopen. December ended without incident. No family emergency, no final confrontation, no sudden apology that changed everything. Just time doing what time does when you stop interfering with it. On the first Monday of January, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, watching snow fall outside my window. The city was muted, slow. I felt grounded in a way I never had before. Not guarded, not numb, present. Later that day, I attended my first meeting as a full voting member of the State Advisory Board. No one introduced me by my family name. No one referenced my history. They referenced my work. That was the point. The meeting was long, technical, necessary. When it ended, Eleanor Price, the board chair, caught my eye. "You've stopped carrying things that were never yours," she said quietly. I smiled. I finally noticed the weight. That afternoon, I received the message from my mother. Not a request, not an update, just a photo. The old family dining table, empty. Sunlight across the surface. No caption. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I put my phone down because I didn't need to interpret it. Whatever it meant, it belonged to her now. That night, Evan emailed me. "I got my certification results. Passed. Barely," I replied. "Barely still counts." He wrote back, "I'm learning how much you used to hold together." I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, because acknowledgement doesn't require reassurance. A week later, my father sent a handwritten note. No return address. "Hannah, I don't expect us to be close. I just want you to know I see you now. Not the version I assumed. The one you are." I folded the note carefully. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt complete. Because the truth was, I didn't need them to see me anymore. I already had. Over the next few weeks, I began sharing my story in small, intentional ways. Not as family drama, not as revenge, but as a case study in boundaries, in systems, in what happens when you stop confusing loyalty with self-erasure. People listened. Some recognized themselves immediately. After one talk, a woman in her late 40s approached me, eyes tired but steady. "I've spent 20 years keeping my family business afloat while being treated like background staff," she said. "I didn't realize I was allowed to stop." I met her gaze. "You are. The cost is discomfort. The reward is yourself." She nodded slowly. That was the work now. Not proving anything. Not punishing anyone. Just naming reality clearly enough that other people could recognize it too. By spring, my life felt full in a way that didn't require explanation. My days were built around work I respected, evenings around relationships that didn't drain me, silence that felt chosen, not imposed. My family existed in my life at a distance that felt right, not erased, not central. Balance, and that balance was the real outcome, not revenge, not karma, not even justice, but self-respect, sustained. If you've listened this far, I want to say this. If you've ever been the reliable one, the invisible one, the person who held things together so well that no one noticed the cost, you're not weak for wanting to be seen. You're strong for choosing not to disappear anymore. Sometimes the most controlled, devastating form of revenge isn't exposure or confrontation, it's withdrawal. It's living so fully aligned with your own values that the people who benefited from your silence are forced to face its absence. If this story resonated with you, Take a moment to like it, subscribe, or leave a comment. Share the moment you chose yourself, even when it was uncomfortable. There are more stories like this coming. Stories about people who stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing themselves instead. This was my story, and it doesn't end with them. It ends with me.